Morning, everyone. Welcome back if you were with us yesterday, and welcome if you're just joining us afresh today. Well done for getting in for 9. It is early doors, so well done to you guys. But welcome everyone to the second day of the Women's Engineering Society Virtual Annual Student Conference 2021. Our theme this year is Serving Society, and today is the obviously the second day, and we've got lots of good things planned. Before we start, I'd just like to say a massive thank you to our fantastic sponsors this year, who are BAE Systems, Ball Corporation, CBRE, City Fibre, Dialogue Semiconductor, McLaren Racing, and SME Graduate Employment. So massive thank you to our sponsors and massive thank you to our speakers for yesterday and for coming up today. Again, please use the hashtag Serving Society, and if you tag us at Wes1919, I'm sure our social media team will reshare, retweet, but we'd love to see some activity on social media. I'll quickly introduce myself again in case there are some new people today. I'm Susan Robson. It's my pleasure to host today. I'll be dropping in and out at the beginning and at the end to sort of field questions for our speakers, obviously listening to the speakers as well. I actually work at National Grid. I'm not an engineer, but I am currently working with a team of engineers on carbon capture, usage and storage. But I also work at WES in a voluntary role on the board. So that's me. So I think we won't go through the technical pieces on Hublot. I think it's fairly, I think it all worked quite well yesterday. So I think you just need to make sure you check into the right room for the sessions. The sessions are pretty prompt. Yeah, if you can come on time, that'd be brilliant. We also have lounges where you can network in the breaks, and we also have exhibition booths where you can check out some of our sponsors, talk to them about jobs, that kind of thing, interviews, what they do, what they're looking for. It's a good opportunity to do that. So encourage everyone to do that. Elizabeth, are you still here? I don't know if Elizabeth, our CEO, wants to say a few words. Oh, there she is. Oh, she's gone. There she is.
It's okay. Yes, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the second day of the student conference. It's lovely to see so many of you this morning. And we've got a really packed agenda until about 2 o'clock. Just remember, in the breaks, you can go to the lounges and the rooms and the exhibitor booths, and there's some fantastic videos, particularly on McLaren Racing. You'll see me. You can leave your details for those our sponsors and those in the exhibitor booths if you're interested in finding out more about the companies. And I'm delighted. I want to say thank you to all the speakers from yesterday, and thank you to Susan again for chairing the conference.
Thanks, Elizabeth. So today we've got similar format to yesterday, some really great speakers coming up, including our keynote for today, who is Chi Onwurah, the Shadow Minister for Digital Science and Tech. Really excited to hear that one. And then we've got the same sort of format. We've got 3 life lessons from engineering. They were brilliant sessions for anyone who didn't come yesterday. They were really great insights into people's engineering careers. And then we have the same format as yesterday, in that we've got 3 concurrent sessions running. So you have to have a look at, if you have a look at the agenda, you can pick which ones you want to go to, because there's some different things in there. So great. So I will leave it there. Please do join us at 9:15 at the main stage for the keynote. I will see you in there.
Hi everyone. We actually need to just stay in this session. We're just waiting for Chi to join us. So if you can bear with us for a few minutes, she will actually join the session.
Hi everyone. Sorry, it's not Chi. I know you've come to see Chi, but unfortunately we're having some connection issues. So we are just seeing if we can get her connected. Oh, yay! Brilliant.
Hi, good morning. Sorry.
Good morning. You've saved everyone from having to listen to me.
Oh, that's a great thing to do first thing in the morning, but I very much doubt that.
Brilliant. Welcome.
I've got the half. Oh, I'm not. Can you see all my face or just half of it?
Just half. Oh, perfect. Beautiful. That's it. We're in. Cooking with gas now. Brilliant. So I'll do a quick introduction, Chi. So very pleased to welcome Chi Onwurah, who is MP for Newcastle upon Tyne Central, which I was excited to see because my daughter has literally just started at Newcastle Uni. Always good to know.
It's a great university.
Oh, she loves it in Newcastle, I tell you. She's having a good time. Sorry, back to you. But you're also the Shadow Minister for Digital Science and Technology. I'm going to leave it there because people have come to hear you speak, and you're going to talk on our theme this year, which is serving society. If hopefully you'll have time for questions at the end, Chi, is that?
Yes, I think I'm going to talk. I think I'm going to talk for about 20 minutes, and then yes, there'll be time. Should be time for questions. I'd love to have questions. That's the most interesting part for me, is people's questions.
Great. Okay. Again, people, if you put your questions in the chat, and then when it's time for questions at the end, I'll field those to Chi. Brilliant. Thank you, Chi.
Thank you. Thanks so much. And so, yes, so it's great to be here today. Well, here virtually today at the student conference. Actually, I wish I'd been able to take part in such a student conference when I was a student at Imperial. I'm Chi Onwurah. I'm the MP for Newcastle Central, and I'm the Shadow Minister for Science, Research and Digital. And I really would like to thank the Women's Engineering Society. It's just a fantastic organisation for inviting me today. It's been 34 years, good gosh, since I graduated from Imperial with a degree in electrical and electronic engineering. And it's it's a thrill and a great pleasure, as well as an honour, to be invited to speak to a future generation of engineers. And I take great pride in being the only chartered engineer in Parliament. You know, and I knew from a young age that I wanted to be an engineer, but I wasn't. You know, I didn't have any role models. I suffered from what I now call Marie Curie syndrome. That's the inability to name more than one female scientist or engineer. And when I said that I wanted to be an engineer, and kids in the playground said there weren't any women engineers, I didn't have anybody to cite in return. What I should have been able to do, actually, is name Rachel Parsons, who was the first female naval engineer, the world's first female naval engineer, founded what we believe is the world's first all-woman engineering company, and actually helped set up the Women's Engineering Society. And she grew up just a few, I think 3 miles from where I was living. But her story, like so many stories of women in engineering and science, wasn't told and wasn't known. And when I entered Imperial my first day in 1984, it was, and I went to a state school in Newcastle, Kenton Comprehensive, fantastic school. And there I found myself in an overwhelmingly white male and privately educated lecture theatre to learn what's our college song in an atmosphere which I now recognise, partially from having been in Parliament for 10 years, got to be said, I now recognise as a public school debating society. And having grown up in what I'm proud to say was the socialist state of Newcastle upon Tyne, I was annoyed and a little intimidated, it has to be said, but not daunted. Now, I believed I was part of an advance guard of what would soon be an army of female engineers. Indeed, that's what I was told, that just as in medicine and the law, professions which had been traditionally male, engineering would become increasingly gender balanced. And back then, 14% of engineering students were women. Now, after 40 years, that figure has climbed to 18%. That's half a percentage point per decade. And at this rate, I think it will be 2,741 over 700 years in the future before we reach gender parity, and that's just not acceptable. And working class pupils as well are less likely to have specialized science teachers and do up to 25% worse than their middle class peers, and are less likely to study engineering as a consequence. And as a shadow minister, as an MP and a shadow minister, it's one of the reasons that I, if you like, went into public service, was to change that, to have an impact on people's lives in many areas, and particularly in having spent decades working in the telecom sector as an engineer, to be able to make a real difference. And I also have to say, and I'm just not trying to be depressing here, but my own experience at Imperial's engineering faculty was not positive. And in fact, in the second year, I wrote an article for The Guardian about what it was like to be a black female engineering student in a mostly male science faculty, with the rag mag for Imperial had racist jokes in it, which I have to say was very discouraging. And I didn't have such great experience with engineering professors. Also, it should be said that I did at one point, I did sort of fall asleep in lectures regularly, and I almost blew up the power lab at one point at Imperial. But that wasn't why I didn't get on with the professors. I think it was because the environment in which I was studying was replete with racism and misogyny, and the majority, though not all, of the professors seemed to think it was nothing to do with them. Indeed, some contributed to it. Now, I am glad, and I'm told, and I'd be very keen to hear of you, that things have changed, and that engineering departments are working hard to ensure a more inclusive environment in which the overt racism and sexism that I experienced would not be tolerated. But I do know that women engineering students still report widespread bullying and harassment, and that has to change. As a working, I worked for 23 years as a professional engineer, and it was a fantastic career. Waking up every morning with new challenges, and the achievements of which I am still really proud today. For example, rolling out Nigeria's first GSM network, building the telecoms network, which still, I am told, works and carries people's traffic and calls. But as a working engineer, I was so often the only black person in the room, the only woman, the only working class person, the only northerner, the only socialist, and the only Newcastle United fan. That's quite a lot of difference to own, and of often facing the reality of being stereotyped both implicitly and explicitly. I think that's something that people who are not in a minority do not understand, as just how tiring that can be, as well as frustrating. So I was asked, was English my first language? Was I really a qualified engineer? Where was I really from? I think the most important thing, sort of lesson that I learned over time, was always, was to recognize the bias when it is there, but never to internalize it, because it is other people's problems, really not mine. And after 2 fantastic decades in the engineering profession, where I worked in France, Nigeria, the US, Denmark, as well as traveling extensively in to Singapore and around the world, wherever the telecoms networks were. I made a significant career change. I entered politics in 2010, just after the expenses scandal, when the reputation of politicians was probably at its very lowest. Having said that, over the last 3 to 4 weeks, certain politicians have been doing quite a lot to bring it back down again, but it was particularly low then. And I know that my fellow chartered engineers looked at me in absolutely horror when I said I was standing as a candidate in Newcastle Central. It's like, why are you going from a reputable, proper, respected professing like engineering into something as disreputable and dirty, if you like, as politics? And what I said to them was that I was going into politics for exactly the same reason I went into engineering, to make the world work better for everyone. And the reason, the person who inspired me to be interested in going to politics was my mum. She grew up in crippling poverty on the quayside in Newcastle in the 20s and 30s. Of her 6 siblings, 5 died before adulthood, and they died of the diseases of poverty. So for my mother, the council house we lived in was luxury, and the fact that we had the National Health Service to take care of her when she had breast cancer and hadn't been around to care for her brothers and sisters made her very proud of it. And she made sure that I understood that the council houses, my fantastic school, hospitals, they didn't just erupt from the ground like bricks and mortar mushrooms. They had to be built, they had to be paid for, and it taking generations of struggle by working people to make them priority for government. So it was those experiences and my mum's influence which helped formed my values and beliefs, and made me interested in politics. I joined the Labour Party when I was 16, and I was actually I was elected as MP from Kenton School in a mock election when I was 17, and I was always in the Labour Party, even when living in Paris, even when living abroad. And I always thought that representing Newcastle would be, the sort of the biggest honour possible. But I kind of thought that if I was going to be an MP, then someday some sort of big hand would come down from the sky and make me one. But it was only in the sort of the debate about what we call all-women shortlist, which is basically prioritising women for certain seats in the Labour Party, that made me really think about it and find out what the process was. And as I say, there wasn't for all-women shortlist. There's often debates about what's called positive discrimination, despite the fact that obviously we've had centuries of positive discrimination which has put certain groups into dominant positions in certain sectors. But I wouldn't have stood for selection if it hadn't been for all women shortlists. I would have assumed that some man would already have been sort of tending the constituency for years and getting to know all the right people, and I wasn't going to throw my hat into ring if somebody had already brought up the circus, as it was. And I think, and it's really important to say that in retrospect, I would have had a really good chance at an open selection. But I didn't know that at the time. I underestimated my abilities and I overestimated the requirements of the job. And don't get me wrong, politics and being an MP is a really challenging job, and it's certainly a full-time job, and it isn't easy. But I thought you had to be perfect and a genius, and to be honest, a quick look at the male politicians around at the time should have convinced me that wasn't always the case. But I didn't know many politicians. I wasn't in sort of politics personally, and I think one of the messages I'd really like to get across is that politics is a form of public service. And indeed, it is the only way that in a democracy we can change the world for the better. with the will of the people. And that's what makes it such a, an inspiring, even though it is also quite a daunting profession at times. And I often tell people that Parliament is the most diverse working environment I've ever been in. And that surprises people, but it probably won't surprise you, but until I say that I worked as an engineer for 2 decades. It is one of the great joys, if you like, of going into politics from engineering was to be in an environment which had a higher proportion of women. And since 1929 was when the first woman was appointed to cabinet, Margaret Bonfield, and Diane Abbott was the first black woman elected to Parliament in 1987. But now in Parliament, half of Labour MPs, at any rate, are female. And though we're not quite there in terms of representing the country when it comes to the number of black MPs. Black women MPs, just 12 out of 220 women MPs are black. We still have, there's been a huge improvements in the last few elections. We've, in the last 2 elections in particular, we have particularly really increased the level of representation in Parliament. And it's really important because I often say that you can't, that the representative, you can't have a representative body which isn't representative. It loses its credibility. And it's really important that Parliament represents not only by gender and race, ethnicity, disability, etc., but different roles, different professions, and I think more engineers as well. And I think that for me, humanity, engineering is a kind of critical part of humanity's progress. We've historically sought to overcome challenge and create the opportunities that improve our lives, from sharpening spears to smartphones. Engineering with politics is the twin engines of progress for humanity, and so many engineering achievements have become so normal in our day-to-day lives that we now take them for granted, whether it's the ability to travel across the world, COVID permitting, of course, or access to food and safe drinking water for much of the population. That is what engineering has helped do for the world. And I often say that engineering is the most caring profession, because it is, what could be more caring than ensuring that everyone has clean water or can communicate with each other. But as we know, engineering is not, and technology is less representative than in Parliament. And I think that really does matter. And one of my favorite examples of the importance of having representation is from technology rather than politics. And I don't know how many of you have iPhones, but when iPhone developed a health app, they wanted to make sure it supported all aspects of the user's health. So that was all possible indicators of health. So temperature, obviously, weight, exercise, diet, how much you were sleeping, all that would be recorded by the app. And so it did, support all aspects of your health. If you were a man, they forgot about periods. And the reason they forgot about periods was because not one person designing the app had ever had one. And that, to me, is a great example of, it's a visible example of what's happening all the time, in decisions made in labs, in boardrooms, in the corridors of power in Westminster. And if you're not in the room, to quote the Hamilton musical, if you're not in the room when it happens, then your voice is not going to be heard. And that applies to designing technology applications, which have to be, and particularly now when we see algorithmic bias, and the importance, the hugely important role of technology in everybody's life. It has to be diverse by design, but it also applies to policies, which are debated and legislated for in Westminster and in city councils and local and parish councils up and down the country. And because it's so many of our future challenges, the reason for me, the reason my representation is critical, so many of our future challenges, from climate change to healthy living, from food poverty to data privacy, from megacities to rural inclusion, have engineering at their heart and huge social economic consequences. When I entered politics, I thought that I was leaving engineering behind, and that was, that was really sad for me. Though being an MP was the proudest day of my life. But actually, technology and engineering and science are everywhere now, and to have an understanding of those when we debate these issues in Parliament is such a great asset. And so I think that I'm very grateful for my engineering degree, the experience it gave me and how it helps me as a member of Parliament serve my constituents today. But I do think that there is we need to. It's kind of saddening for me to see that my constituents fearing technology. And as I've been in Parliament over the last 11 years, I've watched, as technology has gone and engineering has gone from being something which was sort of boring, but respected, to being exciting, but distrusted. And to me, we need to recognize that engineering takes place should take place within a political, regulatory, and ethical framework. We talk very little of the ethics of engineering. The doctors have a Hippocratic oath, duty to do no harm. What about engineers? Certainly the capacity for harm is enormous. And we need to work together, I think, to ensure that engineers have the ethical framework and values to address the harm as well as the good that engineering can do. And I know, I know that many engineering departments are actively working to include engineering ethics in the work that they're doing. And so I spoke about algorithms. Some of there's so many technology challenges that we're facing in terms of understanding their social impact. Is it inappropriate for an algorithm to take an important decision about a human without a right of appeal by that human? We've seen US teachers who are performance managed by algorithms who are not allowed to see the commercially sensitive basis for its decisions. That kind of algorithms which determine whether the length of a sentence that somebody might receive who are biased against people of color. We need to, those kind of ethical decisions, if you like, need to be embedded in the way in which technology is developed and tested before being released. And one of the things that I'm looking at in Parliament, and for example, with the online safety bill, which is going through Parliament now, is how we can do that. And the last thing I want to talk about briefly is climate change, which is the existential challenge facing humanity, and it's one for which engineers have some responsibility. We helped industrialize human labor over the last couple of centuries, and in so doing, we laid the foundations of our current climate emergency. But we have to. The first industrial revolution had massive technology change, which led to extremes of exploitation and inequality. But I really believe we can build a new industrial revolution, a green industrial revolution, without the extremes of exploitation and inequality, with good jobs. And so you can bring together good jobs and decarbonisation. And that is an ethical choice, to make decarbonisation about good jobs for across our country, and valuing people at the same time as we're saving the planet. It's also a practical business choice, given that sustainability is increasingly the most cost-effective solution, and indeed politicians must make sustainability the most cost-effective solution. And that was one of the things being discussed at COP26, which I attended for a couple of days. And that so net zero should be the engine of our future prosperity, as well as our drive to address climate change and keep to 1.5 degrees. And I believe that by being bold and ambitious, by investing in sustainable manufacturing methods and engineering to produce green solutions, we can build a new industrial economy while safeguarding our planet. But that fundamentally means changing the way we make things, and that's going to take a lot of inspired young engineers. But unfortunately, that is what inspires a lot of young engineers today. And I remember talking to a group of Extinction Rebellion civil engineers who said that, as they put it, they wanted government to give them the resources to act on behalf of the most important client ever, the world. And I really do think that is part of my role as a politician. As a child, I was inspired by the engineering marvels that came before me in the Northeast, the ships, railways, and the space race in order to build spaceships. Now I think net zero is a challenge that inspires me, both as an engineer and a politician. Saving the planet and transforming the world, I think it's a moral imperative with engineering at its heart. It's a huge challenge, but it's also a huge opportunity. And I know that it's an opportunity that will both inspire and forge a new generation of engineers. Thank you very much, and really look forward to your questions.
Great, thank you, Chi. I've written so many notes. Everything you said was, you were just, saying stuff, and I was just like, this is amazing stuff. One thing is, fascinated to hear, we've got a shared background. So my grandparents actually lived in poverty in Byker. And, yeah. And the only reason I'm from London is because they came down to London to look for work, basically. Yeah, so really interested to hear what you I'm just wondering what, the key, when you said in poverty and the quayside, I mean, the quayside's really quite fancy now.
Oh, it is. I mean, that's, when I was a kid and my mum would take me down there, it was just in the process of sort of being de-industrialized, if you like, and the dockyards had gone, and you could see that it had been a poor area. Now it's incredibly fancy. Now if you go there, we've got the Baltic Museum, we've got the Sage Concert Hall, we've got a very fancy Malmaison Hotel, and lots of clubs and bars. It's great for a night out now.
So please do put your questions in the chat. One already come up there. It's from Claire. So Claire wants to know how we can educate people fast enough to make good decisions about tech.
Well, that's a great question. I mean, I think that's a question that really goes to the heart of sort of what I was talking about our future economy and our future society, where everybody needs to understand better technology, because it's such a central part of our lives. And in terms of how we can do that, I mean, there's many aspects to that. There's sort of digital skills, there's engineering skills, there's actually I think sort of mathematical skills. In terms of how to do that, one of the things that I'd like to see that as part of the sort of building back from COVID, and COVID has encouraged or forced people to change their jobs, change career directions. And sometimes I know that for many who graduated in the midst of COVID found it very hard to find jobs, those who left school at that time. So to invest in more easily accessed skills training and lifelong learning, I think it's absolutely critical. I knew what I wanted to be an engineer from the age of about 9 or 10. But people should have to make those decisions at that age. Oh, yeah. And also, as we're living, living longer and working later, I don't know what age the students in this audience will be when they retire. The retirement age has gone up about for women about 7 years during my lifetime. So we'll be working for longer. People will want more than one career. So for me, the critical aspect is investment in lifelong skills, and then specifically also empowering teachers in schools, for primary schools and secondary schools, in understanding engineering and science better, because that is what helps inspire young people. And I know that there are some programs where universities, etc., work with teachers to support better engineering and science skills. But it's absolutely, science and engineering should be for everyone, not for a few. That's my motto.
Yeah. No, great. Kate's got an answer. She says, obviously, thank you very much. Kate's obviously enjoyed it today as well. What's the most important piece of advice you'd give to a female engineer who's just starting out on their career?
Wow. I suppose, can I say a whole sentence, not just one thing? I guess it would be enjoy it, because it's a fantastic career. It's a fantastic opportunities, to devouring all the potential in engineering and technology. But I'd say also, be true to yourself. Your voice, your thoughts, your inspiration has just as much value, if not more, as anyone else in the room, whatever room that you are in. And so speak out and speak up, because your understanding and your perspective might be what is needed to bring some really important application or invention or whatever to the market. And so reflect your own experience in what you say.
Yeah, great. No, that's really good. Aditi's asking, is it possible to make ethical engineering a standard industrial practice?
That is a great question as well. And in fact, interesting, I was just so the Reith Lectures this year are by a data scientist whose name unfortunately I've forgotten, but the Reith Lectures, which the BBC do every year, and that one of the things that he's been talking about is ethics in sort of artificial intelligence, and how challenging it is, if you like, but how essential it is that we do make it a standard. So I think the answer to the question is yes, but it'll take government, professional bodies, and sort of engineers and scientists working together. But I think a good place to start is by having, if you like, sort of worked examples and ethical dilemmas as part of engineering courses, as well as a real understanding of the responsibility that you have as an engineer for the impact of what you are designing and developing. I think it's clear that doctors are responsible for the impact of their treatment. I just hope it's as clear to engineers that we share a responsibility for the impact of what we are designing and bringing to market.
Great, yeah. I just looked it up. It's Stuart Russell.
Stuart Russell. He's a great.
I'd like to say I knew it, but I don't. No, they're always great, the Reith Lectures, aren't they? Because they just manage to get such a good spectrum of speakers, I think. Thank you. So Elena says, thank you very much for a down-to-earth talk. So you talked about COP26, and she said, judging from the results from the conference, do you think that a fourth industrial revolution is on the verge of happening?
The conference was incredibly inspiring. It's just seeing so many people from around the world coming together, not only, in fact, probably least sort of the politicians and the civil servants, but all the non-governmental organizations, all the lobbyists and the activists. And I suppose I do think a green industrial revolution is happening. It seemed to me that we would reach the point, and whether we're going to stick to 1.5 degrees, I'm not that optimistic on, but I think we've reached a point where it is becoming unacceptable for businesses normal, and every single sort of business and organization feels it has to change. Now, it was very disappointing that we didn't get further on coal, on moving away from coal, but I think that the momentum is there, and I do think I am hopeful that we will see a real sort of change over the next few years.
Yeah, and I think as well this year, more than previous COPs, businesses had a real presence, didn't they? Like you say.
Yeah, no, businesses. I mean, businesses were everywhere. From sponsoring events and just advertising and etc. And I had many conversations with businesses who feel that they're being viewed, their reputation is being judged on what they are doing environmentally, that's right. And that's a really important.
Yeah, that's good. That's right. Faduma's got a question. What advice would you give to a first-year biomed engineering student about finding out about career options and opportunities? So to your point, you sometimes people make you feel like you have to choose what you want to be when you're 9.
Well, I think that's a great question. I suppose say two or three things there. Talking to people and networks. Like you've got the Women's Engineering Society, and I'm sure there should be the biomed societies, the professional networks. Talking to people who are doing different jobs already, and listening to what their experiences are can be really helpful. And I would, almost everyone ultimately enjoys talking about themselves or talking about what they're doing. So don't be put off, sort of writing to people or contacting people on Twitter or whatever to see what their options are, what their experiences are. And I'd also say, my experience in, as I say, in Parliament, we have the Office of Science, the Parliamentary Office of Science and Technology, which produces research notes for parliamentarians on different subjects. And, for example, they take on people with expertise in biomed and other sciences. So there are huge opportunities in areas where you might not, or organizations or areas which you might not imagine it. So engaging and talking to as many people as possible can help.
That's a great shout. Yeah. Good. No, I second that. Definitely network. So I'm going to ask a question now. So selfishly. And I'm going to pull together a few themes that you spoke about, Chi. So looking at, you spoke about engineering actually being a caring profession. And I wonder whether we don't talk about it in that language enough to attract more women. And I think Elizabeth's appeared to give me we've got 4 minutes left and we will get cut off. If we get cut off, I just want to say massive thank you, Chi. We shouldn't get cut off until 10. But I just, it'd be nice to sort of finish on a note about, how do recruiters change the narrative around engineering to attract more women? Maybe whether it's through, the climate change appeal or the caring appeal. What do you think the biggest change they could do?
I think that's absolutely right. So I mean, I think that there are a number of changes that recruiters can make, and I actually had a discussion with Harvey Nash about this quite recently. So I do think the language can change to be more inclusive. And this was a study. Actually, I think it was a study that was done for Network Rail, which sort of looked at using sort of, and it's a cliche anyway, but using kind of very aggressive ways about very competitive, etc. In recruitment adverts, using more, contrasted with using more sort of inclusive and teamwork and sort of achievement, orientated, shared achievement orientated. That can make a big difference. And as I said, what is more caring than delivering? If you're delivering clean water, or if you're building a bridge, it's not. It can be the biggest bridge in the world, but it's the difference it makes to people's lives, and that kind of thing is not emphasized here. Housing, that the difference that makes to the built environment. So I think there's that, and I think that also in terms of how there's a lot of research on how people do well in interviews is really down to how the interview is constructed. Having a mixed interview panel, and in talking about engineering, not just as something that really improves people's lives, that make a difference to people. And engineering in some ways is the most tangible change that we have in our lives, on a day by day, on a moment by moment basis. The things just looking around which make a difference, from whether it's from washing machines to your smartphones, they all come out of engineering. From the COVID vaccination, in terms of the getting it to people, the tests that we can take every day, those are huge feats of sort of micro engineering. All that, and talking about that in a positive way, I think this can make a huge difference.
Yeah, brilliant. Talking about things more in terms of tangible outcomes, human outcomes. Okay. So fantastic. If I had you on my own, I could talk to you all day. I'm disappointed. But we're finishing now. Okay. So I've got loads of stuff I want to talk to you about. But thank you so much for coming in. I can see from the chat that people have loved listening to you. And you continue to inspire people. So thank you, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Well, I'm going up to Newcastle now, so on the train, if I can get to the train, given there's a tube strike. So I'll send your regards to Biker.
Oh, great! Thank you. Lovely. Thanks, Chi. Brilliant talk. Brilliant. Thank you.
Bye.